We can describe the leg lock system in the following terms. There is a general or overall system. It consists of 6 essential and sequential skills. The first 2 skills involve 2 skills welded together. That's because in practice they're so closely unified that they can't realistically be pulled apart. So the first essential skill is grip and inside position. The second is distance and connection. The third is your ability to break an opponent down to a hip. The fourth, to be able to negate your opponent's resistance to the control in which he finds himself. The fifth is to generate heel exposure. And the sixth is to break your opponent's leg. These 6 essential and sequential skills run throughout all elements of the leg lock system. However, in order to manifest those skills, they have to be further divided into 3 subsystems. These are the straight ashigarami system, the cross ashigarami system, and the reverse ashigarami system. Each one of those subsystems has a central problem which they are designed to overcome. So, for example, the cross ashigarami system faces the turnout problem as its central problem. The straight ashigarami has the shared spiral as its central problem. And the reverse ashigarami has the cross leg problem as its central problem. Fourthly, there are 10 core principles which characterize the leg lock system. I'll list them now in no particular order. These are the double trouble principle, the idea that whenever I go to attack one of my opponent's legs, the overwhelming majority of the resistance comes from the second leg. And so if I can tie up both of my opponent's legs, I'll have a much easier job controlling my opponent. The second is the dilemma principle, that as much as possible, I want to create not so much problems for my opponent as dilemmas. Every time he breaks out of a certain move, he should go into another threatening move. I can build dilemmas, trilemmas, quadlemmas, etc., etc. The more the better. But at a minimum, I should always seek to create situations where my opponent faces a dilemma rather than a problem. Third principle is the percentage principle. There are a huge number of leg locks out there, but 90% of our success comes from 2 leg locks, the inside heel hook and the outside heel hook. There's no question that among the myriad leg locks, some are more high percentage than others. Some work better at the higher levels of the sport than others, and are more applicable in a wider range of situations for a wider range of body types. Focus on the best ones, the inside heel hook and the outside heel hook. Yes, I teach others, but those are the 2 primary ones I want you to focus upon. Fourthly, there is the central problem principle. It's my belief that for any situation in the sport of jiu-jitsu, there is always one central problem, sometimes more than one, but at least one central problem that motivates the actions of both athletes. It gives direction to the scenario in which they find themselves. Understanding what the central problem is the beginning of how to build a system to create solutions to that problem. The 5th principle is the separation principle. I make a strong separation between the mechanism of controlling my opponent and the mechanism of breaking my opponent. Very few people do this. Most people just teach a heel hook per se, rather than the mechanism of control, the ashigarami, versus the mechanism of breaking, the heel hook itself. You must learn to divorce the 2 to maximize your effectiveness. The 6th principle is the hierarchy principle. Just as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a whole is divided up into hierarchies, there are various pins, some of which are valued more highly than others, so too the various leg locks and the various ashigaramis are also arranged in hierarchies. Understanding which are the more valuable, the more desired locks and control positions is very, very important for your development in your leg locking game. A 7th principle is the opposing forces principle. This is the idea that whenever we go to control and break our opponent, we always want to create situations where the direction of my break and the direction of my ashigarami go in opposing directions. In addition, when I go to physically break someone, the forces that I apply on the joint should also be in opposing directions in order to maximizing your breaking potential. The eighth principle is the holistic principle. Most people just teach heel hooks or any other leg lock as an isolated move. We've seen this idea that the best way to understand leg locking is to look at it as a sequence of events that begins long before the heel hook itself is enacted. It begins with things like grip and inside position. And only when a long chain of events have been put into operation do you finally get through to the move that breaks your opponent. Only when you understand the whole process of heel hooking do you have success. The ninth principle is the multiple ashigarami principle. This is the idea that for almost all of our most successful and high percentage attacks, we will employ more than one ashigarami to enact one lock. Most people simply apply one ashigarami per lock, whereas we will use multiple ashigaramis to cover different tasks. We see heel hooking as a multitask activity. There are many separate tasks that need to be performed in order to apply one heel hook. The best way to operate is to have an ashigarami per task so that you can custom fit your control mechanism to what you're trying to achieve for every step of the journey of heel hooking. The 10th principle is the closed wedges over open wedges principle. You'll notice that my favorite breaking positions all involve closed or reinforced wedges, where one of my legs reinforces the position of the other. This creates a much stronger, tighter control over my opponent's movement than if I have open legs around my opponent's legs. The two most favored breaking positions, inside Senkaku and outside Ashigarami, both feature closed wedges.